Welcome to another operations training. Today we will cover three important safety topics: caustic safety, lockout tagout procedures, and circuit breaker policy. First up, we'll talk about caustic safety. We keep caustic at Faulkner Lake in the form of a 50% sodium hydroxide solution in two separate 275-gallon totes. One of the totes is in the caustic building, and the other is a spare stored in the blower building. We use caustic to increase the pH of our effluent in order to meet our permit, particularly in the colder months. It's kept on a containment pallet in case the tote fails, because we want to do everything possible not to come into contact with it. It's a clear, highly corrosive chemical that has no smell and should be respected every time we interact with it. It's common knowledge that the lower the pH of an acid, the more dangerous that acid is. What many people don't know is that the reverse is also true. The higher the pH of an alkaline substance, the more dangerous it is. Sodium hydroxide is the most alkaline substance there can be at a pH of 14, which is the highest that the pH scale goes. The National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, or NIOSH, classifies caustic as immediately dangerous to life or health. There is a lot of potential for injury when handling caustic soda. It is corrosive to skin and will cause severe burns. NIOSH says any chemical over a pH of 11.5 is considered corrosive to your skin, and caustic's pH of 14 is approximately 500 times stronger than that. This picture of the hand is of a woman who used a swab lightly coated with a sodium hydroxide cleaning solution without gloves for 2 to 3 hours. It took her several hours to start feeling a burning sensation, and by that point she had already developed several severe blisters. Her hand ultimately required a skin graft and both plastic and reconstructive surgeries. The picture on the right is an example of eye exposure to caustic. As you can see, it can cause severe eye irritation, possibly damaging the cornea and potentially resulting in blindness. Even a caustic mist can cause eye irritation. If the mist is inhaled, it may cause upper respiratory tract irritation, and swallowing may burn the mouth and throat and result in gastrointestinal irritation and ulceration. If your eyes are exposed to caustic soda, immediately flush with plenty of water for at least 30 minutes, holding your eyelids apart and rolling your eyes back and forth to ensure flushing of the entire surface. Washing within 1 minute is essential to achieving maximum effectiveness. Seek medical attention. You may have 10 seconds or less to avoid serious permanent injury. For skin exposure, immediately shower with large amounts of water for 30 to 60 minutes. Anybody assisting the victim should call a physician immediately for them as they continue to shower. Remove clothing while showering, but remove the goggles last to prevent any lingering caustic from getting into your eyes. Do not apply oils or lotion, and lastly, try to keep the victim warm. For inhalation, remove the victim from the contaminated area into fresh air immediately and seek immediate medical attention. If ingested, do not induce vomiting. Instead, give large amounts of water followed by milk if it's available. If the victim should start vomiting or it should occur spontaneously, try to keep their airway clear, seek medical attention, and never give anything by mouth to an unconscious person. As for North Little Rock Wastewater's policies for caustic safety, number 1 is that all proper PPE should be worn at all times when working with sodium hydroxide or caustic. This should include goggles, chemical apron, face shield, and long chemical gloves. These items should have been issued to you and are to be kept in your locker, and you are responsible for keeping track of your PPE. Applicable PPE when operating the caustic chemical pump is at minimum your goggles. Swap valves and pump the red and pink solution through the chemical lines before you disconnect any of these lines. While pumping the red solution through the lines does make it safer for you to handle, that does not mean you can't be hurt when handling them. There still may be residual caustic remaining. Small amounts of caustic should be added to water under constant agitation. Never go the other way and add water to caustic. This will cause a violent exothermic reaction, and if significant amounts of water and caustic mix too rapidly, it may cause dangerous mists, boiling, splattering, or a violent eruption. Small spills of caustic may be washed down with water. Any residual left behind may be neutralized with acetic acid or vinegar. We keep bottles of vinegar in the caustic building on top of the cabinet. Larger spills may be soaked up with an earthen material like dirt or sand, swept up and stored in a bucket with a lid for proper disposal. Any residual left behind may be neutralized with vinegar or acetic acid. Totes must be monitored periodically to ensure they're not leaking into the containment pallet. You can look through that dark grating down into the bottom and just make sure there's nothing being collected or gathering in there. For more information, the SDS is available in the caustic room cabinet or the Ops Building SDS binder. Our second safety topic today is circuit breakers. Our primary concern with circuit breaker safety is in minimizing the risk of electrical arcing. An electrical arc is the flow of the electricity through the air. They can seriously injure, especially if it passes through your body, or it could injure if it's exposing you to its intense light, heat, or a blast. They're caused by shorts between two phases or a phase to ground, and some examples of what can cause them include dust, debris, equipment failure, and working on live equipment. Sometimes all it takes to generate an arc is to throw a breaker. Prior to resetting any breaker, perform a visual inspection on the equipment in question. Look for any visible damage such as black soot and note any unusual odor such as electrical burn. If the inspection fails, do not reset the breaker. Here's former operator David Johnson demonstrating proper technique. You should wear a leather glove, stand off to the side, and look away while resetting all breakers. Operators can reset single-phase 110 and 220 volt circuit breakers as necessary. These are your normal style breaker you'd find in a normal household. They should be within an enclosure that's clearly labeled 110, 220 volt single-phase power. Operators can reset larger three-phase circuit breakers as well, but only if they're installed within an enclosure and accessible via an external reset handle. Verify the enclosure door is properly closed and latched prior to resetting it. Here is a pictured example from the belt press room motor control center. Large panel main breakers or building main breakers are to be reset by the electricians only. Operators may not reset breakers that lack a handle outside of an enclosure. Pictured here is an example of such an instance. Operators must notify electricians of any breakers that were reset. If a breaker trips after hours or on the weekend, leave a written detailed description of what happened for first shift to pass on to the electricians. If a breaker trips again for an unknown reason, do not reset again without contacting the electricians. Our last topic today is our lockout-tagout procedures. When we work on the equipment utilized in our industry, there are hazards not only to the employees who are working with the equipment, but also to other employees in the area. When it's necessary to perform maintenance or to service that piece of equipment, additional hazards are created due to the continued presence of energy used by the machine. This energy could come from an outside power source or could even be stored in the equipment itself. Another possible hazard could be a flow of water to an area where workers are present. Utilizing our lockout-tagout system could prevent these hazards from being realized. So any equipment that's being worked on shall at minimum be tagged until the job is done. The thing you tag could be electrical, hydraulic, or mechanical. Whenever possible, it is desirable to lock out the actual power source rather than just placing a tag that may be easily removed. Items that can be tagged or locked include, but are definitely not limited to, buttons, handles, pull chains, ropes, valves, electrical disconnects, panels, switches, etc. As to the actual procedure, the sequence should look like this. First, notify all affected employees that a lockout or tagout system is going to be utilized and the reason. If the equipment's running, shut it down via the normal operating procedures. Isolate the equipment from its energy sources. This includes electrical energy as well as any stored energy such as hydraulic, air, or water pressure. Lock out, tag out the devices with the assigned locks and/or tags. After ensuring all personnel are clear of any hazards, check the energy sources to be sure they are disconnected. Operate the push button or other normal operating controls to make sure the equipment will not operate. Return the controls to neutral or off after you've tested it. Only the employee that tags or locks the equipment may remove the tag or lock. Other employees may not remove the tag without supervisor approval. The employee who locks must store and keep track of the key. If the lockout lasts longer than a shift change, pass on the information to the next shift. If the equipment is not locked or tagged out, it's considered ready for use. So when do you use a tag versus when do you use a lock? You can use a tag without a lock if the person tagging it out stays there with the equipment and is present during the work and repairs. If the device is to remain out of service longer than one shift, a lock must accompany the tag. And here's some examples of when to lock out, tag out. The inspection plate on a pump being removed for a clog. You don't want that pump coming on when you're elbow deep in there. Unstopping conveyors. Really any kind of work on the conveyor would count for this. So, say you're working on a doctor blade or pump maintenance is in here doing work on the roller. You don't want that conveyor moving while you're working right above that. Servicing chlorination equipment. Valves that can affect someone's safety downstream. You've got people down in a clarifier working on something. You don't need that valve opening up and start filling with water. Any situation that requires employees to insert arms, legs, hands, or feet into the equipment that moves. Here's an example of a blower coupling that broke a few months ago. You don't need that blower motor coming on, start spinning this half of a busted coupling while pump maintenance is in here replacing it. And that concludes our training today on caustic safety, lockout procedures, and circuit breakers.